Now at the moment we are housing 14 animals over 2 different sites, and we do have 5 trainers spread between those two sites. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about some of that research a bit later on in the talk, but this footage does give you some great insight, and that's right on top of a first seal cam looking back at the trainer. So that's kind of cool, but we are doing some incredible research at the moment. This is our other site, the Open Water Research Facility site, where we do have sea lions that we are trained in the open Burrard Inlet, and I'll go in more detail. And here we have Yasha sailing off into the sunset. So you can see, guys, we can attach it to the harness, and it does give you a really cool perspective of what it's like for a sea lion moving through the water. There we go. Okay, well tonight, guys, I'd like to give you an insight into animal training, in particular with pinnipeds. Okay, now commonly pinnipeds are known as seals and sea lions. Pinniped meaning winged or fin-footed. That's how they move and swim around both in and out of the water. However, I want to focus also on research training and the challenges that brings as well. As I mentioned, I was hoping to bring a sea lion or a seal into the studio, but some slides will have to do. Now let's talk about the decline and what we're actually looking at the aquarium. Now basically we've gone into too much detail and to stick to animal training. I do want to quickly explain why and what we're actually researching. We're looking at these 2 species, the Steller sea lion and the northern fur seal, which are in decline by some dramatic numbers. Now the Steller sea lion populations have dropped some 80% in the last 30 years or so and are considered endangered. The fur seals are in decline by about 6% each year and are considered vulnerable. So when you think about that 6% a year, you multiply that by a few years, that's a lot of animals. So what's actually happened is the Vancouver Aquarium has teamed up with the University of British Columbia to try and find out why. Now we have a number of captive animals. We're trying to find out as much information as we can about the population, so we can actually basically grab all that information, relate that to wild populations, and hopefully help those populations in decline as a whole. Okay, my job. It's pretty amazing. My job is to work with these animals every single day. These guys are ambassadors for the species, but more importantly, they are work colleagues. We get to know these animals very, very well, and they get to know us. They have bad days, look you or I, and we really get to know their personalities. So what is a sea lion's personality? What is the personality of a pinniped? There's incredible animals to work with, and they have a lot of personalities, so much so that you really have to incorporate each of those personalities into the training, and that's what makes every day different. And what I really enjoy about my job is every day is different, the animals that you work with are different, and it makes my jobs very interesting and also very challenging. So basically I've condensed down to about 4 or 5 different attributes or traits of a sea lion and seal's personality. Let's start with that seals and sea lions, being captive animals, they are conditioned and trained, but certainly not tame. So these animals were actually captured for research purposes, and so they retain many of those characteristics of wild animals, but they are trained and conditioned to work with the trainers. This means they are not domesticated. Okay, now I've put together what I call the 3 N's, and that's nervous, neophobic, and neurotic. And this sort of describes essentially what a sea lion, some of those personalities, traits that come through. Now, sea lions and seals are very nervous animals. It is a survival instinct. It does help them survive and avoid their predators. Sea lions, in particular, Stellers, are very nervous animals. They're referred to as very skittish animals, and they're very actually hard to study in the wild as well, because when you approach them in the boat, they simply disperse from their rookeries and their haul-outs, and they're very hard to see up close. So they're very nervous, and that's you'll find that in captivity as well. They're also neophobic. Neophobic basically means they don't like any kind of change. They like and work better in a routine, so making the training as consistent as possible is very important in pinniped training. The degree of change can be very subtle for us, but it's a big deal to the animals. Very simple things, how you wear your hair, what clothes you wear, if you have dangly earrings compared to when you don't. All these little subtle differences the animals pick up, and that's why they are considered neophobic animals. Also neurotic. This is basically an anxiety that can develop and lead to unwanted behaviours. But with constant stimulation and training and enrichment, neurotic behaviours can be reduced or avoided. Now, aggression or aggressive. These animals are naturally aggressive, but not malicious. What that basically means is that's part of their personality and part of a very important part of their personality trait in the wild as well to survive. But they're not malicious. They don't attack us. Aggression is an important part of their personality when it comes to social groups and breeding. Now, seals and sea lions do have the potential to bite trainers. Now, most trainers have been bit at some point, but in most cases will be the trainer's fault by not reading the situation correctly or putting the animals in an uncomfortable position. Now, biting is certainly an unwanted behaviour, but it's a natural behaviour of the animal when they do feel threatened. Now, sea lions in particular are very large animals. You've probably seen on that first slide that was Sika. She's almost 500 pounds, okay, so almost 250 kilos. So these animals are huge. They're females. Males are 3 times that size. We don't have any males at the moment, but they can get up to 900 to 1,000 kilos, so 1-ton animals. So you have to be very careful working with these animals. Just because of their size and their nature, they do have the potential to be quite aggressive, so we have to be careful. The next few things, they're not affectionate or loyal. Okay, now there's a little bit of misconception. Seals and sea lions are not like puppy dogs. Okay, they don't like to be touched and they do not care if they please us or not. We work very hard to build a trust with these animals, and part of that trust lies in training them to be tactile, so allowing us to touch them. That's very important in some of the husbandry things that work that we do with these animals. But it is important to gain that trust and be able to touch them through training. The last thing I have on here is hormonal. Seals and sea lions can be very hormonal, very seasonal animals. In the wild, these animals eat, they sleep, and most important for them, they breed. Now, breeding season for most pinnipeds is during the summer months. Females will give birth and mate again within a few weeks, and males will defend their territories and harem of females very, very aggressively. In captivity, seasonal and hormonal changes exist in both sexes. They can go off their food, making it hard for training and research, and it can also become very aggressive as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about training. Now, the method of training we use is known as operant conditioning. It's basically where wanted or desired behaviours are reinforced and negative behaviours are ignored. Now, just by looking at that picture, can you guess what sort of reinforcement we use for our animals to reward them? Fish, okay? That's our primary reinforcer, is fish. And these guys go through a lot. It depends on the time of year, but these guys can go up to about 6% of their body weight that we have to feed them each day, okay? And that can be up to about 8 or 9 kilos. Now, if you put that into human food, it's probably equivalent of one of us eating about 50 Big Macs a day. So weight-wise, that is. So it's a lot of food. Let's talk a little bit more about training. Now, there's basically 3 parameters that we actually use our training for. Now, the first one is husbandry. So the health of these animals is probably the most important part and aspect of what we do at the aquarium. And I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail about that. Now, as I said, it is our #1 priority before any of the research, and basically we train our animals to assist in checking their health every day, so we can pick up on health-related issues as quickly as possible, and that also makes Marty's job a lot easier as well. So everyday checks that we do include eye, ear, mouth. We give a full body physical. Here we have one of our northern fur seals. We're just doing a simple mouth check. Okay, so we're getting the fur seal to open her mouth. We can look inside, make sure her teeth are all in good condition. We've also desensitized the animals to allow us to put our fingers in there. So if there's any bones or scales or maybe something stuck in between those teeth or in their mouth, we can actually put our fingers in there without worrying about them biting us and pull those objects out. So husbandry training before anything is our #1 priority when it comes to these guys' training. I did have on there stimulation as well. Now, stimulation training is basically making sure these guys are mentally and physically very healthy. So we do lots of fun stuff as well. It's not all serious stuff. We get these guys to do lots of retrieval and lots of fun things to keep them mentally stimulated. So stimulation training is very important as well. But I do want to concentrate a little bit more on the research training. Okay, so a number of studies with both animals can be simultaneously going on at once, and I just want to sort of cover a few of those relevant ones and what we're actually doing at the moment where the training is important. Now the first one is energetics, or basically what are the energy requirements of these animals. Now by asking, never making, we never make our animals do anything they don't want to, we ask them into what we call metabolic domes or boxes where we can record through the analyzing of gases how much energy these animals actually use. Now you can see one of our fursuits on the left there is we've asked her into a metabolic box, and we close the door and they stay in there for about half an hour and we record the temperature, and basically we can record how much oxygen she breathes in, how much carbon dioxide that she breathes out. We can put that into a fancy calculation and work out how much energy she uses over that period of time. Here on the right of the screen you can see Billy, one of our other trainers, getting the lengths and girths of one of our fur seals. Now what is cool about these fur seals and what we're actually finding out and how much they grow and how quickly they grow. Now what is also really cool is that these guys spend the majority of their first 2 years of life in the open ocean swimming around. So not a lot of information is known. Basically once they're weaned from mum, they'll hit the Pacific Ocean and they'll continue to swim until they're about 2 years of age. As an important part of not only our routine health checks, but a large part of the research is to obtain blood. Now we do this by placing the animals under anaesthetic, a procedure that Dr. Marty and our team have mastered. The last one I feel is the most coolest part of my job is working with the sea lions at our open water facility. There we have trained 4 females to assist with diving physiology, research in the open Burrard Inlet without a cage or any restraint. On the right there you can see one of our females. Her name is Yasha. She's a almost 11-year-old female, and basically this is part of our research training up the Burrard Inlet. Now we have trained our animals to actually work in the open ocean. What that basically means is there's no tethers, no ropes attached, no cages. She's actually trained to actually dive down to certain depths. We do set up some tubes. She receives a reward at the bottom of that tube where she comes back in and surfaces inside a metabolic dome. Then basically we can record how much energy these guys use when they're actually diving. So those 3 parameters throughout the research and through both different sites, we can actually see energy costs when they're actually resting, when they're actually swimming, and when they're diving. So these are all important information that we actually use together to try and find out why these populations are declining.